Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kate Mosse. I'm a novelist and a playwright and the biographer of CFT. And as many of you know, I do all the pre- and post-show interviews for this wonderful theatre. I'm enormously thrilled today to have Christopher Luscombe, who is the director of the Shakespeare Double Bill that is finishing this incredible 2016 season here at CFT, the last season under Jonathan Church and Alan Finch. It's a particular delight because Chris also opened the season across the way in the Minerva with Travels with My Aunt, which was a runaway sold-out success. And so it's a wonderful thing for Alan and Jonathan to have you back, to bookend, as it were. Now, because the show is very complicated, we've got to scarper off this stage at 1:20 so we will talk really fast, there will be a few questions, and then you will all leave and all the scene people will come back on. So before we start, can I ask who has already seen Love's Lost? Oh, you look at that. And who has seen Much Ado?
Not so many.
Oh, not so many. And who is going in this afternoon to Much Ado? Right, no spoilers then, just in case. Chris, before we talk about the glorious productions, and as I said, I spent most of the time in the theatre weeping with laughter and then crying, because these are incredible pair of shows that you put together. Can you tell everybody a little bit about the provenance of the idea of doing Love's Labour's Lost and Much Ado as a double bill?
Yes, thank you. It's a really delightful thing to put these two plays together, because I don't think that any theatre company has ever done that before. I think we were the first at the RSC. We put them on 2 years ago, and it was one of the happiest experiences of my life. And then to get the joy of coming here to Chichester to remount the shows and take them into London, because we're going to London after we've been here. The idea came from the Royal Shakespeare Company. They approached me about it, and they said, would I like to do these two plays? Because there's a theory that Shakespeare may have written them as a pair. There's certainly evidence that there was a play called Love's Labour's Won in Shakespeare's time. It's referred to in documents of the time. There's references to Love's Labour's Lost and Love's Labour's Won. And so Love's Labour's Lost, we all know that play, but we don't know what Love's Labour's Won is because we've never found it. There's no text for Love's Labour's Won. And so there's a theory that it may be one of the well-known Shakespeare plays with a subtitle. And Twelfth Night is Twelfth Night or What You Will, and Henry VIII is Henry VIII or All Is True. So it may be that Shakespeare called Much Ado About Nothing, or Love's Labour's Won, W-O-N. And so there's been some debate about which of Shakespeare's plays it could be, and because of the chronology, simply when he wrote the plays, it can only be 4 or 5, and Much Ado is one of the candidates, and Taming of the Shrew was another hot favourite for a couple of centuries, and then in the 50s there was another document appeared in which Love's Labour's Won was referred to as well as Taming of the Shrew, so that knocked that out, and now it feels like if it's any of the well-known plays, it probably is Much Ado. So the idea of the RSC had was to put them together, see whether they work as a pair, see if it feels like they are a pair. I don't think anyone could ever prove the point, but I do think in doing them and living with them for as long as I've lived with them, that I would say they fit together very well as a double act. And the one play seems to sort of answer the other.
When you were asked to do it, to start with, did you have a view? Did you know about the scholarship and, you know, the Crispin novel and the, in fact, Doctor Who particular script about this missing play? I mean, did you think you did have a view, or did you just go into it as a sort of detective, I suppose?
Yeah, I knew that the theory existed because I used to be an actor and I'd been in Love's Labour's Lost and Much Ado at the RSC, so I knew both plays quite well, and having lived with Love's Labour's Lost for quite a long time, I'd read about this notion of there being a follow-up play, Love's Labour's Won. So I sort of was aware of it, but I'd never really looked into it properly, and so this was a chance to do that. And it's like a detective, really. And I think it gave the productions a kind of extra edge, because we weren't just trotting out two very well-known plays, we were actually looking at them in a new light.
And one of the things that everybody who's seen both will have noticed is that you have a company of actors and they appear in both productions.
Yeah.
But you have made a decision that the actors playing Barone and Rosaline in Love Labour's Lost, and then playing Benedict and Beatrix in Much Ado, you've kept them as leads, but you've muddled everybody else up.
Yeah.
So is that because you don't want to claim too much that they're a pair? Explain a little bit about the casting, because it's very attractive that they're not all corresponding.
Yeah. That was over the course of several months, working out how we should double up. And it was tempting to go down various different paths with that. I mean, for example, there's a policeman in both plays, so it felt like, well, maybe the same actor should play both policemen, or there's two vicars, should it be the same vicar in each play? But then it felt that they're so different, one play and the other, that you really want different kinds of actors, to be honest. And so I felt that was a bit of a red herring. But it did feel that Rosaline and Beatrice do have huge similarities, and Benedict and Barone, or Barone and Benedict, have great things in common. And I thought that it would be a way of linking the plays, really, that they did feel like a pair rather than two separate events. And I thought it was exciting to see actors take on the challenge of the leading roles in both. And I've never regretted that. That's always actually felt like we got the doubling about right. I've never thought, oh, damn, I wish I could go back in time and rethink that. It seems to have been the right thing to do. And I've always thought it equates, like, you know, in Peter Pan, when Captain Hook is actually Mr. Darling, that they're not the same person, but there's sort of resonances. And in a way you feel that in the children's dreams or nightmares, their father becomes Captain Hook. And I feel in the same way that there's a sort of dreamlike quality. Early on I decided not to call Rosaline Beatrice or anything. I mean, that was an option, we could have done that. But I felt, no, they are different people, but there's similarities, there's sort of echoes in a dreamlike kind of way.
But also because of the emotional, I hate to use this word, the emotional journey that they have been on, the way that you framed both plays, and it says everywhere, so this is not a spoiler, before and after the Great War, that sense that people might be a different version of a similar sort of person of themselves. That's very powerful in the way that you've done it. Can I come on to something that for me was one of the biggest joys, is that they are speaking Shakespearean language. It is clearly the late 16th century in terms of its metre and its music, but yet it is utterly modern to our ears as we listen. Now, how have you achieved that? Because, of course, I was going through thinking you must have cut out a lot, but actually the words are still there, but they feel like they're talking to us.
Well, that was one of the most sort of the big challenges, really. I think Love Labour's Lost is particularly difficult verbally. And
because it's so dense?
It's so dense. A lot of the language is just really obscure. There's a lot of words that we just don't use now. And actually, Much Ado, given that it's a very popular play, and everyone seems to sort of know Much Ado and have a view on Benedict and Beatrice, but actually when you start really working on it, that's pretty complicated. The plot is very complicated, and I maintain that Much Ado is a first draft, because there's so many things that don't tie up. And so I did feel that was one of our main projects, and the fact that we were rehearsing them for a very long time. The RSC gives you a really good, really proper rehearsal period. You can really get in there. So a lot of the time was taken on finding ways to release the text and make it really comprehensible to a modern audience.
Did you cut?
I edited both plays quite heavily. Love Labour's Lost, if you do the whole thing uncut, is about 3 hours, 20 minutes. And I feel very strongly that audiences nowadays, maybe audiences of all time, really beyond 2.5 hours, I think their concentration begins to wane. And I think for a comedy, I mean, maybe if you're going to see King Lear, you're happy for it to last 3 hours. But I think for a
we should ask the audience.
Yeah, but I think, well, I know I'm not prepared to. No, but I think that for a comedy, 2.5 hours is fine. I mean, for a modern comedy, I often try and get down to 2 hours. But I think for a Shakespeare, 2.5 is okay, acceptable. And part of the pleasure, I think, of these shows is they're quite epic. So you need to kind of really enjoy the full richness of them. But I did do quite a heavy edit. And I think, having been in both plays, I knew them from the inside quite well. I knew what worked and what didn't. And I was very keen to make it as funny and as accessible as I possibly could without actually changing the words.
Who did you play?
Who did I play?
Everybody wants to know that.
Oh, right. I played Moth in Love's Labour's Lost, and I played Dogberry in Much Ado. And so the poor actors who played them, who were both brilliant and far better than I ever was, they had to endure rehearsing it with the director having played it. So they were terrorised by that.
You didn't give them your Moth as an example.
I tried. Occasionally, Peter used to say, well, how did you do it? What did you do? Just tell me what you did. But I tried not to do that because he's so fantastic. And in fact, we've given him quite a lot of extra material. He's got a great singing voice, so we gave him quite a bit of the singing. And I felt, he's really made it his own. And I think Dogberry is one of the hardest parts in both plays. And I came to it, having played it, with very particular thoughts on how we could make it work. And Nick, who plays it, is really a comic genius. And so to work on it, a part I had such strong feelings about with an actor who could really do it, was an amazing experience. Because I think we have created something with Dogberry. The setting of post-First World War is particularly useful because it means that his malapropisms come really from shell shock, so that they're rooted in something very real rather than just being a comic device.
Yes, as if he's a fool and doesn't know any of the words.
Yeah, which is funny up to a point. But what I've always felt about Dogberry is there's something tragic about him. As he's tragic. Well, the whole play I think is bittersweet and tragicomic. I mean, for a very well-known comedy, it's got some extremely dark stuff in it. Some really ugly, awful things that happen. And I felt that they come out in a post-war world. You can believe in them. People are scarred by the war. And Love's Labour's Lost, everyone seems to be so happy, and the sky is blue, and the sun's shining, and it's all glorious, like the Edwardian last summer. And then post-war, there's a feeling that people have really been through something terrible, the trenches. And even if the women folk have stayed behind, they've suffered massively too. They've lost their families, they've lost sons, they've lost brothers, they've lost fathers, whatever.
Which helps make sense of the very black business in the middle of Much Ado About Nothing, when the men and the women are so violently on opposite sides.
Exactly.
And everybody's grasping for a new way of being, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, it
exactly.
makes. You mentioned, about Moth having a lot of the singing. Nigel Hess's score is just wonderful, and it's not an underlying, sort of piece of music, incidental. It's properly a character in the play. Now, how late in did you decide that there was going to be real singing? Because presumably you auditioned actors who could hold a tune.
Yeah, we in a sense, we got lucky that we just happened to end up with a lot of actors who could sing. But also, when we did it in Stratford, we were cross-cast with a play that involved a lot of music. Right. So we had to have people who were musical. A lot of them play musical instruments, actually. So we did have musical people. And when we've come here, we've got about 2/3 of the Stratford company. So the people who have joined us, I suppose I knew what the musical requirements were by that point. So I did get people like Stephen Pacey playing Leonato in Much Ado, where he's got a wonderful singing voice. So I knew that was a great bonus.
Of course, he's known to the Thai audience anyway.
From Travis Mount, exactly, and other things. So with Nigel, though, I'd worked a lot with Nigel. He's an incredible composer. He's sort of, for my money, the best theatre composer around. And he's done so much Shakespeare, and he loves Shakespeare. He knows it. He's definitely inspired by Shakespeare. If you give him a Shakespeare lyric, he seems to come up with an amazing scoring for it, an amazing tune. He's great on tunes. I was really keen to give him, not free rein exactly, but a great scope for his music. And of course, both plays do have songs in them. Much Ado finishes with a dance. Shakespeare has clearly indicated that he wants music in both plays. So it felt natural, really, to say to Nigel, run with this. And also, I like using underscore. I like using music for scene changes, so it all feels that it's properly sort of constructed. There's not a dull moment, really. That's the idea. Yes, it was a complete joy to work with Nigel, because the setting, I should say, by the way, that the period of the First World War wasn't my idea. That was presented to me by the RSC. They said it was the centenary of the First World War when we did the shows originally, and they said, why don't we mark that with these two productions, and we set them either side of the war. And they said, you don't have to do that. It's up to you. You can do whatever you like, but we'd like to suggest to you that you do that.
And here is your contract.
Yeah, exactly. And so I said, yeah, you bet. Actually, though, I said you bet because I knew both plays. I knew that they both fitted that period fantastically well. Love's Labour's Lost is quite often set before the First World War. Several productions have done that. But I've never seen a Much Ado that's come after the First World War. People have done it post-Second World War. They've done it all kinds of periods. But I've never... I'm sure it's been done, by the way. I'm not claiming it's original. But it's very rare. And it's also very rare to set it in the winter. It's a play that people tend to do Mediterranean, for obvious reasons, and they set it in the summer, and it's hot and sultry, and that accounts for a lot of the crazy behaviour. People are at the end of their tether because they're overheated. Whereas I felt there was something really different about setting it in the winter, and we did that partly because the First World War came to a close in November. So it felt right, and that led on, of course, to Christmas, and it made it very different from Love's Labour's Lost, which is the height of summer, and it felt like a very good opposite. And so I really loved that because I felt it made Much Ado feel different from any other Much Ado I've ever seen. And that was important because you want to feel like it's a new play when you're working on it and not just something that's familiar and as I said, you're trotting it out. You don't want that.
I mean, we've talked a bit about the bittersweet thing and that there's a lot of very dark things, particularly in Much Ado. For me, I have to say, I often have this sense with Shakespearean comedies that they're not really very funny at all. Yeah. Forgive me, but you know what I mean. It's like, really... What you have done, it is just hilarious. I was weeping with laughter because there was a mixture of two types of comedy, and I think this is what makes what you've done so rare. There was the comedy which absolutely is people coming in and not hearing that somebody else is there and being overheard and all of that sort of thing. But there was also a love with which you have done the more slapstick. Yeah. You know, when they're singing a song and everything's falling off and people are dropping things in other people's eyes. Yeah. Now, how do you manage that and not let it become pantomime-y? Because that, I think, was so extraordinary that it never stepped over. But I was weeping with laughter. But
I think that...
Because what's its purpose in Shakespeare? I suppose that's what I'm really asking.
Well, one of the things I really love about Shakespeare is the way he does mix styles and tone throughout the play. You know, that you go from a Dogberry scene, which is knockabout and daft, to the wedding scene, which is appalling and all in verse and really full of the most extreme, serious emotions. So he's not afraid of mixing and matching like that. And I just felt that we should honour each scene in the way he's written it. And I think, as I said, the bittersweet thing, the feeling that the whole play is based on opposites. Shakespeare loves opposites. I mean, a lot of his lines of verse are based around contradiction and antithesis is the word I'm looking for. So that seems to be the way he thinks. I think it's part of his genius that whenever he comes up with one idea, he thinks of the opposite. He's just forever switching backwards and forwards. So I'd wanted to really honour that so that we're not afraid to be really knockabout. I mean, in a way, when you say pantomime, I love pantomime, actually. When it's done really well, I love it. So I don't think that's a dirty word for me. And I think that there's something really exciting about taking an audience on a ride where they get a lot of different variety within the course of the evening. Also, though I'm blessed with a company who respond to that, I think they ran with that idea. They wanted to be that kind of an evening. And, you know, we've had great fun agonizing over one little tiny bit of comic business, the best way to get the laugh. You know, it's when you're with like-minded people, that's really exciting. No one ever said, oh, for goodness sake, it's only a joke, who cares? You know, that was never the feeling in the room. It was about, let's get this right and let's get the laugh. There's a real hunger for good laughs. There's a thing which I call bad laughs, where there's a bit in Much Ado. I hope this isn't going to spoil things for anyone, but there's a bit in Much Ado where, at the end, Claudio is presented with his new bride, and that's one of those moments in Shakespeare which can just tip over into comedy just when you don't want it to. And we've really worked at taking away any potential humour in that moment, that it's deadly serious. When you've led the audience down a path that they're watching a comedy, you have to be so careful that you don't make them laugh when you don't want them to laugh. So we've really looked at, I won't bore you with the details of how we did that, but it's a sort of sleight of hand, really. And I think that's really good fun when you're creating that with actors who care about those things.
You're in previews at the moment, although obviously it was 2014 at the RSC, so you're 2 years on from that. If something like that happens, you're sitting in the house, it's your press night tomorrow, and then, of course, Manchester and into London.
Yeah.
If you hear, for the first time even, this afternoon, a laugh that you think is disruptive and in the wrong place, what would you do as a director? Would you go, we need to change it, or would you think it was just a one-off audience? You know, when do you decide to change?
Well, I always think that you should give things perhaps 2 or 3 performances, because sometimes you can get a reaction which is just to do with some quirky thing that one of the actors did that he'll never do again. So I just look very, very carefully at it and try and look at it in its own terms, that particular thing. But the cast would be very quick to tell you that I'm forever changing things. And even though we played the shows for 6 months in Stratford, and we've rehearsed them now all through the summer, and we've been playing them with an audience here for over a week, it's incredible how much we are still working away at them. Someone said that with any kind of work of art, like a play or a book or a painting or whatever, it's never finished.
No.
You know, you can always go back and tweak. And I suppose with a book, when you send it to the publisher and it's gone, then you have to kind of step back, don't you? But with a play, of course, it happens every night. And so we have the chance to...
Yes, I think that is the difference, that, of course, when you and the director and the writer, obviously Shakespeare, God bless him, long gone from this, but when you leave town, the actors are left doing a unique performance every time.
Yeah.
Whereas, obviously, with the book, once it's set down, it's done.
Yeah.
You know, you can't fiddle with it anymore,
Yeah.
mostly. One thing before I go out and take a couple of audience questions.
Yeah.
With the company, you've mentioned that 2/3 of them are the RSC company, and there's this, you can feel it, there's an enormous sense of them about the site all the time, and you can tell which is in which plays because of all the chaps have got their little moustaches, you know, all of this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You had there were wonderful performances all round. You had the outstanding Edward Bennett in Stratford, and now you have him here. But here we have Lisa Dillon, who has stepped into the Beatrice Rosaline role. They seem so perfectly matched together.
Yeah.
I find it really hard to imagine somebody else had done it before.
Yeah.
So was that a really big thing, to lose somebody so fundamental?
Yes. Yeah, it was quite scary, actually, because it could have gone horribly wrong, you know. I mean, there's an element of risk involved with any recasting, because I knew Lisa a little bit socially. We've never worked together before. But we've chatted, and I knew that I really liked her, and we met to discuss doing the plays. And it turned out that she and Ed were actually both at RADA together, a couple of years apart, but they knew each other from drama school. So there was just a connection there. But as luck would have it, they get on like a house on fire. And Ed, who is a brilliant actor, I think, has been so accommodating. He's so willing to change things. He's I suppose because he knows that he's very secure in the parts. He wouldn't admit that, but he does know deep down that he's very secure, and so he's able to really take on board new ways of doing things that Lisa's brought. She's brought a lot to the shows and lots of new ideas. There's so many choices in every line, and she's made some great choices, and Ed's gone with them, you know, and he's very generous in that way, I think. And
it makes all the difference because you are cheering them on.
Yeah.
You know, you feel the same as the people, everybody else in Much Ado. Just stop bickering, guys. Yeah. We know you're supposed to.
Yeah.
You know,
you're in denial. You're in love with each other. Yeah.
And it makes total sense.
Yeah.
Can we have the house lights up so we can have a couple of questions? Could you please, if you put your hand up, if you'd like to ask a question, and could it be a question, please, rather than an appreciation, although it deserves everything.
Appreciation's
lovely.
Welcome.
Gentleman there,
Okay.
Jacob, can you...
Hello.
Just wait for the microphone, 2 ticks.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Hello, thanks very much. I've seen both the plays and they are truly fantastic. I think it's superb.
Oh, thank you.
But I hadn't realised, I downloaded the Shakespeare text, as one does over the internet. I hadn't realised that they'd been edited. It shows me I don't know my Shakespeare very well. Is there any chance that you will release your edited text?
Oh, gosh, what an
the
interesting
Christopher
question.
Luscombe
Yeah.
version of William Shakespeare's.
Probably not really, because I don't think there would. I mean, I have in the past actually. When I've often when I do classic plays, I do edit them because for the reasons I've talked about, that you want to get it down to a manageable length or whatever. I've actually I do have a literary agent, and I've talked to him about this whole question because. I slightly feel, I mean, there's a DVD of the shows that we did in Stratford, so they're readily available, people can get them. And I slightly feel, I'm being really honest now, but I sort of feel that if people, I know that there are colleges, schools, amateur groups, whatever, all over the world who can get hold of these, and they could be doing that edit, which did take about 18 months of, well, more actually, 2 years. And we're still working, we're still changing things around. So I feel that all that work, there should in fact be some sort of copyright over it. But then I also feel, well, if they want to do that version, then that's flattering and that's great. So I sort of quite like people to benefit from that 2-3 years of work that the RSC put into this play. So I'm a little bit undecided.
You know what it will be?
Yeah.
I mean, the way of doing it would be to do the Chris Luscombe illustrated version of the text, like T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, as done by Yeats and Valerie Elliott. Another question, gentleman here. Yes, thank you.
Very quick. Do you sense Shakespeare looking over your shoulder?
Do I sense Shakespeare leaning over my shoulder? Yeah, thank you for asking that, because actually I really, really do.
With his pointy beard.
Yeah, and I feel he's a very elusive figure, Shakespeare, isn't he? And no one really knows quite what he was like. But in working on the plays, we get about as close to him as I suppose anyone's ever going to get. And we talk about him a lot. And we talk about what he would like and what he's trying to achieve here and how we can best serve him. This sounds really sentimental and pretentious, but it's true that everything we're doing is trying to please him. Trying to do what I think he would want if he were alive today and if he were in the room and if he had a 21st century sensibility. I mean, he wouldn't even know what the Great War was. So it's a sort of very peculiar thing to contemplate what he was saying. And actually, having worked with a lot of living writers, it's quite likely that he would think the whole thing's rubbish and he would be furious that we've set it out of its period and whatever. But I really like to believe that he would say, oh, that's a great idea. Thank you. That's great. I love that, And I believe he would, and I hope he would, and everything is done to please who I think he was.
And it's a wonderful thing, because actually without the writer, she says, as the writer, there is no play in the first place. So the idea that he's still there, I think, is great. Yeah. Young lady at the back.
How long have you been writing or editing the Shakespeare plays for?
That's a really...
Thank you. Yeah.
That's a really good question, because I'm slightly embarrassed about the idea that I'm writing Shakespeare. I'm sort of thrilled and embarrassed all at once. And
I don't think you ever claimed it.
No, I don't think I did.
It's been drawn out of you, so you should not feel it.
I suppose I do have very, very vivid memories of working on Shakespeare at school. I was in Twelfth Night when I was 16 or something, and feeling that actually if we cut that sentence there, the sentences around it would make a lot more sense, or that might get a bigger laugh if you lost those really obscure words that no one understands, that sort of thing. So in other words, since I was about 16, which is a very, very long time ago, so quite a long time. But and I think probably the more Shakespeare you work on, the more you feel confident enough to make those sort of changes. But please, I'm not making any great claims, and it might well be that there'll be, when I talked about people doing the shows, people might do it, in somewhere in America, they might get the DVD and think, right, well, we'll do the absolute opposite of that, and then they'll do their version. So I suppose it might be a sort of guide of how to do it or how not to do it.
But that's in the tradition. They were plays that changed and were written to be performed.
I do believe that because the text is there on the shelf at Waterstones, that anyone can go and do their version. It's not like, I mean, I know we've made bold choices and we've cut things and we've rearranged things, but our version now in Chichester tonight, this afternoon, and people can go off and do their version, and it's there for them to work on and create their take on it.
That's lovely. Final question from the lady in the front.
Hello. You've talked about the precision of the comedic moments to get like the good laughs, and I was just wondering how you also balance that with keeping spontaneity in rehearsal, so that the actors every night the play feels new, feels alive.
Feels
New, feels alive, feels different.
New and alive.
New and alive. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I believe that part of being professional as an actor is recreating something night after night after night and making it feel fresh. And when you've got actors of this sort of caliber, they are very good at doing that. It's surprisingly, it's not really an issue. I don't even have to discuss it with them. I mean, they have the ability to completely live in it in the moment every single time. And I always feel that if I discussed it with them, it might make them self-conscious about what they're doing. But really, I mean, I suppose there is an advantage in the fact that we love it so much, and I will very happily laugh along in rehearsal at the comic stuff, and I also try and be as objective as I can, because sometimes I will laugh at things that one of the actors does because I know the actor, and it makes me laugh that he's slipped over and fallen on his face or whatever he's done. And I'm laughing at him rather than the character. And so I have to say, look, that was hilarious, but we shouldn't do that in the show. So you're constantly trying to sort of negotiate your way around that. But I try and make the rehearsal room as much fun as I can, because then if it's fun, people can invent and dare to fall on their face and say, God, that was crazy, I shouldn't have done that, I won't do that. But it doesn't matter. They can make fools of themselves, and who cares? There's no embarrassment, And some of the best ideas come from people doing quite bold things, and then you say, well, that was too much, but what we could do is this, or,
Yeah. And that's how it works. I'm afraid I'm going to have to bring it to a close. I know, it's a shame because we do it. There will be, for those of you who are in Chai, there will be the post-show talk with members of the company, which will be on Monday the 24th of October. For many of you who have been supporting the theatre, not just this year, but for all of the seasons with Alan and Jonathan, this Saturday morning at 11 o'clock in here, I'll be doing a question time with Jonathan and Alan about the whole of their time here, the things that they've loved, the things that they wish had gone slightly differently, the highs and lows, I suppose, very few lows of that. I think the final thing to say, Chris, is that because this is the last production of an incredible period of time at Chichester Festival Theatre, for my money, I cannot imagine seeing a better version of Lovers, Labours and Much Ado. I think they are absolutely wonderful. And the gentleman's lovely question about Shakespeare. We walked up the park as the sun was setting, my husband and I, on Saturday, and my husband said, do you know, I think Shakespeare would have been happy with that. No. Ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Luscombe.